before that, I'd like to take a moment, or a few moments actually, to recognize Mr. Distaso. As we all know, you've served on the board for 12 years, selfless services I call it, and I had indicated some time ago that you would be our first recipient of the State Gold Award. You're actually our second, because at the time I didn't know that we would have a retirement today by Demas Leones. So he retired from metal art, but you are, nonetheless, we want to acknowledge you formally. So just to let everybody know what will kind of transpire in the next few moments is I want to acknowledge Mr. Distaso. We also have from Assemblyman Lackey's office, Mr. Roque is here this evening. So you can go first, you can follow either way.
You're already up there, so if you'd like to, please.
Okay. And so we have a couple pieces to share with you. Following that, we will do the swearing in, and then we'll take a short recess at that point and go from there. So I'm going to just read from this Mr. Distaso, and what I wrote here is your selfless service as a board member is duly noted. Your passion, commitment, and dedicated to the district are self-evident. We want our students and staff to exemplify grit and tenacity, the things that we've been talking about, characteristics which you demonstrate on a consistent basis. From December 2005 to December 2017, you served, volunteered, governed, guided, and collaborated with your colleagues on the board as well as district staff. Your efforts are evidenced by improved and new facilities, fiscal solvency, and a plan for the future of our district. We are thankful and grateful for your service. I'm talking to our students about staying gold, so it says stay gold, Mark Distaso, and we want you to absolutely stay gold as you move forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Camera will be in the picture too. Mr. Roque?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brandon Roque. I'm a representative of Assemblyman Tom Lackey in the 36th District of the California State Assembly. I'm here tonight, honestly, just to present an award to an amazing person who's dedicated 12 years to the students, teachers, and faculty of the AADUSD Unified School District. It's truly an honor to see everything you've done, even during the time I was in Vasquez till now. I can't thank you enough for all you've done for this district. So on behalf of Assemblyman Lackey in the 36th District, I would love to present you with an award of recognition for all you've done.
One more photo op. You're welcome. Just a couple closing thoughts for myself. I just want to share that I've only been on the job 3 months. It's a very interesting relationship between the superintendent and the Board of Education. It's a very intimate professional relationship, and I'm very thankful to our board for appointing me to this position. And you get a different relationship with each board member, of course, and I want to just publicly acknowledge you for the conversations we've had, for your input, your thoughts, your passion. I do truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Period for the board member.
Absolutely.
I'll start with you, Larry. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes. Mark and I, we go started off out in the audience, meeting at the Hitchcock Hall for many meetings. And I just too would like to thank you, Mark, for the outstanding 12 years that you put in. And sometimes we agreed, sometimes we didn't, but I think that you've accomplished a lot in these 12 years. The students see the fruits of it, and I'm sure you'll find something else to do. No doubt about that. Yeah, thank you.
Mark, I'm very sorry to see you leaving the board, but I respect your decision. You know, I always looked up to you, and I tried to be somewhere near as good of a board member as you were, but you know, it's just simply not possible. You have so much knowledge and so much experience, and you know, I wish I'd been able to be a better board member because of you. And I try to make up for that through having a commitment to the board, through critical thinking, which I know is important to you, and supporting you nearly at all times that I could. I want you to know, Mark, that you've been a good friend to me and given me very valuable advice. I have confided in you in some very low times personally and in different ways, and you've never let me down. You're a very trustworthy, kind, and sincere person, and I want you to know, Mark, that you've made me a better person by your example. I really mean that. And for that, I owe you a great deal. I will always consider you a dear friend and will be there for you if you ever need me. And I wish you the best in life in ways of health, success, and happiness. And as far as for the community, I will express my opinion in regard to what Mark has done in the district. And I personally feel that he has done more for this district than anyone paid or otherwise in the 12 years that he's been here. And I think many people feel that way, and I also feel that that happens to be the truth. So anyone paid or otherwise, Mark has done more for this district than anyone while he's been here. And so thank you so much, Mark. I have a little little gift to you.
Mark, as I said in the PTO meeting the other day to you, 12 years is a great deal of time to spend unpaid the services district. From what I've been able to gather through being here in the rumor mill and the like, I think that there were times when you may have been the only strength in the district getting through difficult times. And on behalf of the community, I'd like to thank you for 12 years of service is a very long time.
I'll finish very briefly. I met Mark when his son Ryan was one of my Cub Scouts, and through that relationship with the parents are often involved, they're encouraged to be involved in scouting. Through that relationship, I learned about the school board, the case to be on the school board, and several years later, you know, I ended up on the school board, and I don't think that connection may have been there, even though I have 3 kids in the district here, had we not had that relationship. Mark's also been a good mentor, a fantastic mentor for me as until Mr. Pfalzgraf showed up, the junior board member. Especially this year when I assumed the role of president. So I am very appreciative for the mentoring. I wish you the best. I hope you have a wonderful time with the fishing. And thank you for all your service, as everyone else has said.
If I might, Mr. President, I'd like to make a encouragement when I needed it the most. And to be frank, she has very strong parenting skills, so it might have actually been better that I was not at home. Otherwise, I might have just gotten in the way. But I certainly knew that I could come here and spend this time and time commitment knowing that my kids were well cared for and weren't wanting for the lack of parentship. I also need to mention a few people. One of those is Kathy Howell, who was a main supporter of my throughout the years. Lee Jennings, who I could always count on to, regardless of the number of parents I would talk to in Agua Dulce, I knew that I could look at Lee and say, okay, tell me the real truth. And she would. Lillian Smith, who was not just the local newspaper head here, but an activist in the community and very involved in our schools. And all three of these ladies took a risk with me because I was an unknown entity when I appeared on the scene. They took the time to listen and evaluate my positions and arguments on things related to the school district. And for that, I would be ever grateful because they helped to propel me into moving forward into the position that I held for 12 years. On a personal note, I'd like to thank Lucy Thone. When she was the superintendent secretary and we would go into closed session, Lucy became the surrogate nanny to my children when my wife was at work, and basically babysitted my children while we were duking it out in closed session about any number of things. So thanks to Lucy, and it always gets risky when you start naming people, because if you don't name everybody, then it's like, well, what the hell happened to me? But I also have to thank Yolanda Colley. She had a lot of unwavering support for me, provided insight. She was always responsive to me when I needed something from the district office, and she's much appreciated for that. And lastly, I'd like to thank Tracy Costin for her tenacity in any number of things and making sure that even though I wasn't prepared to drop the ball on anything, that she was always making sure that I wasn't dropping the ball. And in closing, I want to share a couple things, because I've had a lot of people in the community say, well, why aren't you staying on? What's the deal? And 12 years is a long time. And so just to put it in perspective, since I've been on the board, we've had 3 presidents of the United States. There have been 3 superintendents of schools. This board has changed its makeup 5 times since I've been on the board. We suffered through 2 fiscal crises, to include the Great Recession that lasted 1/3 of my tenure here. At the time of my election, I qualified for absolutely no senior citizen discount. Today, I qualify for nearly all of them. Since my election, I retired from my main career. I developed a 10-year business plan. I opened up and incorporated a new business. I operated that business, met the 10-year goal, closed that business, and I was still on the school. In 2003, when all of this started, 2 years before I was elected, my son was 7 years of age and my daughter was 5. By the time I was elected, they were now 9 and 7, both attending Meadowlark Elementary School when this journey started. Today, my son is 21 years of age and is preparing to graduate from Boston University in May. My daughter Riley is 19 and in the midst of her 2nd year of study at UC Davis. And the moral of this is time waits for no one. It marches on. I had a nuclear family that was completely intact in with a new phase in my life. And so for everybody that I mentioned and didn't mention, thank you, and in a few minutes, you'll start your new phase. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Distaso. Mr. King, you want to?
Sure, so, Ms. Jensen, if you'd like to come up front, I'll meet you there. If you'll raise your right hand. I, please state your name.
I, Kelly Jensen,
Do solemnly swear that I will support and defend
do solemnly swear that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California
the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the State of California,
that I will bear true
faith
faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the State of
to
California.
the Constitution of the State of California,
That I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I well and faithfully
and that I will and faithfully
discharge the duties upon
discharge the duties upon
which I am about to enter.
which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mr. President, at this time, if you want to entertain a recess, it would be
Yes, let's take a recess, have a little cake, and about 20 minutes?
perfect.
Along.
My fault.
Let's see. Okay, we've moved on to item 8.0, board reorganization. This is something we do every year. Item 8.1 is the election of president.
I nominate Ed Porter.
Okay, Ed Porter by Ken Pfalzgraf. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mike.
And, let's see. Now, Mr. King, so, motion to appoint, oh, that's where we put Ed Porter in there?
Yeah, you could have discussion on it.
Well, okay, so it says nomination of Ed Porter by KP, seconded by MF. And then ultimately, of course.
It's just doubled up.
Oh, it's just doubled up,
Yeah,
that's what we did,
that
okay,
bottom
that's
part-
why I'm
Yeah,
confused.
that bottom part always prints out.
Okay, I understand, thank you, Mr. Porter. All right, any discussion of that? All right, well, we'll call the question. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's a unanimous, congratulations,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
Porter.
President.
Okay.
Do you have the gavel?
All right, item 8.2, election of vice president.
I nominate Larry Layton.
Any, okay, any others, or what, how do we do this? Do we just take a
Well,
vote, and if it passes,
you-
terrific?
I have to have a
otherwise-
second to do anything.
There would be a second, and there could be other nominations.
Okay, any second?
I'll second.
Okay. Second, I'm remembering your initials,
Kelly.
KJ.
KJ.
KJ, that's how I do it on here. All right. KP, KJ. Call the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay, okay, so that's a 4-1-0. Election of clerk, nomination of, how about
I-
Kelly Johnson? Jensen?
I will second that, Mr.
Do
President.
you mind being clerk? Great way to start,
Sure,
okay.
I have no idea what they do with it.
It's not
Or we
hard,
can-
ask
Yeah,
Ken.
can be able to. It's just
Okay,
saying-
and, was that seconded by somebody?
I'll second that.
So it was
I
nominated by
nominated by
Mike
Mike.
Fox, seconded by Ed Porter.
Ed Porter.
Okay.
Call the question?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, there we go, we're done. All right. 9.0.
Can I ask a clarification
Okay.
question? There was one nay,
That name was me.
no,
8.2.
8.2.
That was for Mr. Larry
Thank you.
Layton as vice president. And I'll take it from here.
Oh, well, let's switch seats. But the name tags won't match.
Yeah,
That's all right.
It's all right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Ken. Thank you. You're welcome. All right, we're moving on to 9.0, public comments, recognition reports. You have a card, thank you. And Jacqueline Iyer. And thanks for putting your address on there.
I did.
I trained you well there.
A lot of people train me
State-
every day.
Oh, yeah. State your
I do
name,
some training too. so-
state your name for a record, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Jacqueline Air. I will be very brief. I don't know quite what the protocol for this is, so I guess I'm here to respectfully request that the issue of pursuing a joint use arrangement with the parks to develop pool facilities would be considered, perhaps either put on the agenda, or you can arrange a committee that members of the community can participate in. I'd certainly be interested in doing that. So I guess I'd like to respectfully request that that issue be considered in the near future. And the reason is because, as I indicated on Monday night, I've been attending a lot of the parks funding program, I guess you would call it meetings, I'm not sure what they are, public outreach issues. And there are some opportunities coming up to increase the allocation that we're getting from Measure A. We're only getting about 15% right now of what we pay, but up to as much as 25%. And receiving those funds sort of in a lump sum for larger type facility infrastructure. But that pot is a fixed pot, and a lot of people are eyeing it for opportunities to develop recreational facilities. So I don't know how long that pot will be available, but I know it's available now, and I know a lot of people want a part of it. So I'm just urging you to please consider that, and maybe put together a group of citizens who could work a committee with the school board or something. I don't know what the right mechanism would be, but, and perhaps put it on the agenda to discuss. So-
Mr. President, can I speak to that for a moment?
Absolutely, please.
So I have that actually as part of my superintendent's report. There's actually 2 items that I was going to share with the board to kind of gain consensus on moving forward, just in an exploratory fashion only. But I can speak to that further at superintendent comments, or I can do so now.
I would prefer, if it's okay with you, that you do that as a part of the superintendent comments.
Absolutely.
And, because in order to kind of stay in line with not
I agree.
replying to comments from.
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You got it. Thank you, Jackie. Okay, we're moving on to 10.0. 10.1, AATA representative. Thank you for being here. And you know, we haven't had the regular attendance by the AATA representative since Mrs. Maroney. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you remember who she is.
Yes, and actually I just saw her yesterday. as a
That's
matter of
awesome.
fact.
All right, so nice. So it's great having you here, and I know you've been here for a long time.
Yes,
Every
Peggy
board meeting.
Maroney and a number of other retired teachers attended a event at Meadowlark that we had for Mr. Demas in honor of his retirement. So it was great seeing teachers that have retired, like Jeannie Curtis from Agua Dulce,
Oh, yeah.
and Peggy Maroney, and Judy Stillhammer, and Lorna Williams, and a couple of other retired teachers that came back to Meadowlark for the potluck for Mr. Demas in honor of his retirement yesterday at our school, so that was great. Tonight we're sharing some 21st century learning opportunities for our students, in which they take part in collaboration, cooperation, in regards to science, mathematics, and basically hands-on learning opportunities within our classrooms at Meadowlark, as well as some of the video production technology components at High Desert School. You ready? Okay, go for it. Thank you. Is that it?
No.
It was perfect, you queued it up and everything.
No, I can skip to the next person's
Okay, let's go to the
video.
Yolanda.
Good thing that's covered, it doesn't look like what, yeah.
That's not a science lesson?
Okay.
Volker, can you help us?
I got it, I got it.
You guys are friends.
Don't cue beforehand.
picture. So what's going on in our classrooms right now is a lot of direct instruction, discovery, and student interaction with each other to come up with some of the content standards understanding on a greater level, and we can only share just small clips, but we invite you to come to our classrooms and experience some of the learning. I know when you guys stop in, it's only for a few minutes, and sometimes we're able to interrupt our lessons and introduce you to what we're doing, and sometimes we're not, because by the nature of what we do, we like to interact with our students and capitalize on every second of every day, and our loyalty is with them, so we just wanted to give you a small picture of what we do every day.
Just want to comment, I spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours at Meadowlark Elementary School the other day, and I was in Mr. Trussell's room along with all the other classrooms, and fabulous student engagement going on in every single classroom. So I appreciate the efforts you're making with the video and the connections that you're drawing between next generation science standards and all of our other curricula. So thank you very much for continuing to do that.
Thank you. Moving on to 10.2, CSEA representative.
Thank you, not this time.
Okay, thank you. 10.3, our student representative, Lothar.
All right, first off, I would like to welcome Mrs. Jensen. Welcome to the board.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you here again for the next election that's going to be happening, hopefully. And a couple of things that ended up happening was the KTLA trip that the Broadcasting Journalism class went to. This is a field trip that students from the Broadcasting Journalism class got to see a live production of the KTLA news, and we actually made a special star appearance on the show as well. And also, there were a couple of soccer games that have been going on, and thus far the girls team has won 2 of their games, and the boys team has also won 2 of their games, so we are starting off strong, and we are more than happy to be playing right now. And also, military representatives came to our school somewhat recently, and military representatives from the Army ended up showing up, and also the Navy ended up showing up. And they presented good opportunities for students for their future, especially when it comes to furthering their education at low cost. And UC applications are done since it's September, but the college applications for common applications are coming up, and that's going to be in January, where a lot of the colleges are going to be shutting down their applications. And there's going to be a herd performance tomorrow night, and we hope to see all you guys there, hopefully, or at least most of you. And one other thing I wanted to go ahead and touch up on is that the psychology class is going to be taking a look at the mindset book that was so graciously donated by Mr. Larry King. And he's going to be coming into psychology class tomorrow to help discuss it. And other than that, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, happy candle nights, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Lothar. Thank you very much. Great as always, and I do highly recommend that book, Mindset. I recommend it to all board members, everyone present, all the students. I'm on my 2nd reading. Thank you very much for that book. There's few books that I'll read twice in a row, so thank you very much. We're moving on to 10.4, Mr. King, new construction.
I do have a couple items on that, and Lothar, I want to thank you too, because I've seen a lot of student representatives present. You're one of the few that I've seen make so much eye contact and speak articulately from the heart and the mind. You do a very, very nice job, and appreciate your attendance at the board meetings.
Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show up in a bow tie this time. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say something, yeah.
You look great.
Yeah, oh, you do?
He was too
Nice.
busy trouncing Cal City, thank you.
Okay, so phase 3 at the high school, I'm pleased to inform the board that the bid opening process just completed yesterday, but prior to making any recommendation where the board would approve a final bid, there'll be discussion with the board. So just anticipate that. with regard to Acton School, I have a walkthrough scheduled with TDM for this Monday because I want to review the exact DSA requirements, specifically in regard to the perimeter fencing that's around Acton School and also the brick veneer. If there's a way to preserve the brick veneer without having to put something less attractive over the top of it, because there's concerns of it from DSA of it falling over in the event of an earthquake into the path of travel and hurting a child. However, the path of travel seems out of the way to me and to the kind of the common sense person. It doesn't exceed 4 feet tall except for maybe 1 or 2 areas. Is it something that we could put a planter in there in place to extend the path of travel distance farther out? So I just some questions that we have that Mike Arona's kind of taking charge of and working with Lynn David on this walkthrough Monday. So I'll be there for part of the walk, yeah.
Is that veneer actually, or are those real bricks? I would think they're real.
They're real bricks,
Okay.
but they call it brick veneer because it's a layer on
Layer
the
on top.
outside.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last piece of new construction, I just want to comment on Proposition 39, which is a state funding available for energy conservation items, like lighting, solar paneling, buses, those sorts of things. And there's what's called an savings investment ratio, an SIR. And we're going to make an amendment to our SIR because previously it wasn't showing enough of a savings. You have to show a certain degree of savings before they will make those monies available to the district. So Lynn David's again working closely on that with Mike Arona, and we have an excellent consultant that we're working with on, as Lynn and I discussed today. You really want the consultant when working with Proposition 39 because it's a very specific skill set and knowledge set that experts possess. And in large school districts, they have an energy conservation director or manager, but in our case, we are not large enough to warrant that, so we have somebody who works with our district. So that's it for new construction pieces.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Sure.
And you're up next also, 10.5, the superintendent report.
Sure, and so I'm going to speak to the joint use piece first. I've had some conversation with Mr. Distaso on it. I think at the last board meeting, he expressed some interest in it, and so did Jackie, and she talked about that eloquently at their last board meeting. And so what I would like to see from the board, without it having been an agendized item, is just sort of an informal consensus with the idea of it just being exploratory at this point. Very much to Ms. Ayers' questions, just to reach out across the aisle and say, hey, what is there, what's available, how do we seek and obtain that funding, what would potentially a joint use look like, and so just kind of an investigatory, exploratory measure to see if it's even, is it even something that's out there? I don't even know if it's out there or plausible.
Yolanda, can you let the record show that Mr. Pfalzgraf has left the room?
Sure.
Are you back?
I'll have some comments on this on board member comment, thanks.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, continue, please.
So, if the board's in agreement, I'll reach out. If the board's not in agreement, then I would recommend, Mr. President, that we agendize the item. It sounds like at least one board member has comments that maybe we should hold off and wait to hear what those comments are. But being short of kind of a unanimous, yep, thumbs up, go ahead and check it out and let us know, that would be fine. But if not, I'm open to.
Well, I think that you do have your consensus from what it appears, because it's,
How did we have a consensus already? I don't even
no,
remember us talking about it.
let me finish, please. But I actually agree with you. Let's allow Mr. Pfalzgraf to have his board member comments, because he's expressed that. The other thing that I am personally concerned about is everyone that's spoken about this seems to be very enamored with this idea, to a point where I think at times that may come at the cost of pragmatic thinking, okay? So would I want sometimes there's many things you can bring up that almost anyone would agree with. You know, should we have more transparency? Sure, that type of thing. And should we have joint use agreement with the county On the surface, it sounds like a great idea. However, even though I would, on the surface, just agree with going towards it, I want to see a very pragmatic approach that considers program, considers security, and considers the pros and cons of it. And I think that at the end of the day, I will go for it. But I want to see it approached to that way. I don't want anything approached in a manner where we already expect something and we're just in love with the thing that we're going after. Because that is not a good environment for, critical thinking. So nothing is for free. No one's going to give us a pool for free. I want us to go into this knowing what the pros and the cons are, and allow the community to make an agreement on it.
So this again is, all of those questions would be for down the road, but that's okay. No, those questions would be, I think, more for down the road. This was just if the board was interested in having me just do a reach out to see if it's even plausible. Does it even exist? Is it a possibility? I can come back and say, yes, it is, and here's how it works, and then we could go into that kind of agendized discussion.
I want to see pros and cons about it, and I am very much leaning towards, romancing the county towards, doing some kind of a joint use agreement. But I want to see the pros and cons, and I have no problem with you doing that.
Okay.
Let's let Mr. Pfalzgraf
Sure. We'll
say
wait
his
for board
piece,
comments.
and then at that point, we'll ask for a consensus.
Perfect. Along the same lines, safe routes to schools. So that's a
Absolutely.
separate item that I have.
That's a
as,
no-brainer.
Again, just seeking if the board is interested at this point, and me just seeing if that's a possibility, reaching out to the county, seeing what resources are available. Is the funding still there? Is the idea still there? Is the board comfortable with me reaching out?
This is all I'm saying. Nothing is for free. Everything comes at a cost. And we would be doing the community a disservice going into a situation with the county, just assuming we're not gonna come out ahead. You let them use our gym, if you let them use our stuff. So nothing is for free. Let's just go into it with a very pragmatic approach. So that's the way I look at it.
So I just want, so let me just.
I'm a steward of the community's investment in this high school, so I don't want in any way to approach it.
Well, let's separate the two issues. So
Okay.
safe routes to
Mike,
schools.
please, no eye rolling and stuff. I've never done that to you while you're doing your thing. And
Well, he's given a superintendent report and you're
well,
providing direction.
I have full history on this whole thing. I have full history on I'm privy to certain information that you may not be to. So that's the way I wanted to approach, please. And I have never eye rolled when you were running the meeting. Okay. So thank you very much.
Let me just help the board out a little bit. So just to provide clarification direction for me, let's separate the two items. So joint use, we know we're gonna wait to hear board comments on.
Why are we handling the discussion of that here and now on the, whether you want a consensus for an exploratory or not? I think it's a point of order that it should be discussed now under your report as opposed to board member reports, and I'll tell you my consensus right now. I think it's entirely proper and accurate and great that you commence an exploratory. In reference to that, Mr. Distaso was in it for many years, and he's gone. We need a replacement. We've had other joint use with the park before, such as a softball field. There's nothing wrong with the exploratory. Then we will find everything that Ed Porter wants to know about pros and cons. So at this point, you've got my consensus.
I'm with Larry, exactly what he said.
Now, why were you saying earlier that it came across, Larry, earlier that you didn't have a consensus about it? So anyway, so
We were just
I guess
talking
we just want to hear Ken. Do you mind going through this now? Or?
No, first off, let's talk about this, safe routes to school. I have said numerous times, my look at the county begins with a school sign in front of Meadowlark School. It's really simple. If I can't get a $50 sign up, I don't have a lot of faith in things. And it's not due to anybody not just beating their head against the wall over and over and over. Jackie, Ms. Costan, this has been going on for 2 or 3 years, and I don't see any activity, and it's not due to anyone in this community not reaching out. So, there's a lot of, every time somebody runs for an office or something, there's all these people coming in and the photo ops, but somebody can't even put a set of K-rails in between the overpass abutments, so if a car wants to hit something, it's not gonna be one of our kids. So, where I come from, proper process says, we don't just go out and reach out and, you know, who knows what and whatever. The community always has the right to contact their elected officials, whether that would be us or whatever, but the lead agency on this has not been identified. I don't know if it's the Acton Town Council, I don't know what it is. But in my look at governance, what we would do here is we would assign a liaison committee consisting of 2 board members. Those 2 board members would take the lead on this exploratory thing with the superintendent, reach out, and then it becomes an agendized item that monthly there is progress made. The community has a hub to come to, and then it comes into the superintendent's report every month to say, we've met with this, we've done with this, and it becomes a trackable, responsible item where there's report back. But like I said, these people have stopped at nothing to try to get some attention to this. And so let's formalize this. If you formalize it and appoint a liaison committee, I'm all over this. I'm so happy. I'm jumping up and down. But we need to formalize this process.
I was reading a thing in LA Weekly about the joint use.
I'll get to that, but I really
about
like to.
with Beverly Hills. Do you have any?
Yeah, but I would really like to clear this up. This safe routes to school. Tomorrow morning is another day where somebody's gonna speed off the overpass.
Are you talking about safe routes right now, or the joint
Yes,
use?
safe routes to school.
Okay.
I would propose, I would make a move, since we're just discussing things. This is kind of where you get in trouble when you're introducing things in a superintendent report or board member comments. It's always, well, I wasn't there, I didn't hear this. There's 2 people driving the process. None of that. I would move that we consider appointing a traffic liaison is what I would consider.
So if that's the case, I think, Mr. President, it would have to be an agendized item. I'll come back to the board and I'll bring forward an item.
And when you and I discussed this, that's what I suggested. 'Cause
Could we do this very soon?
It turns into this. When you have it as an agendized item, I felt strongly that it should be an agendized item, and I also told you that I would support it if it's an agendized item. When it's done this way, I just feel the community hasn't had the opportunity, and I know most of the community doesn't care usually. We're in here with the crickets. But the proper way of it is to agendize it, in my opinion, vote on it and go from there. I mean, why don't we explore something with the YMCA? I'm a Catholic, let's bring in,
Okay.
I mean, can you do that, just on my board member comments? Get a consensus on that? The right way to do these things is to agendize them, to expose them to the community. I know that, there's been certain community members just driving you crazy with this, and it just gives the appearance that you're basically bending to their pressure. It's not the way that good governance is done, as Mark would say. Good governance would mean that we agendize this item, we vote on it. I think you're gonna have a 5-0 on it to go and do your thing.
Now, I personally don't have a particular, you've heard me when I'm passionate about a campaign, when I'm passionate about something that I'm proposing, but the only one that I'm passionate about between these 2 safe routes to schools, because I do think that's
I do agree with that, but again, just so I'm clear, the proper way for us to agendize items
I'm fine with that.
is not to be introduced to the superintendent by any groups and to have him bring it up in his comments. The proper way is for anything that needs to be agendized, anything the community wants to agendize, we can agendize it. So we post it. The community has 72 hours to see what it's about. If they care about it, they can come here and discuss it. When it's done this way, Mr. King, the community did not know that you were going to bring this up in your comments, and I think Larry will agree with me. He's a stickler for this, and it will be completely going against what Larry Layton has been preaching for 12 years, that you agendize these things, you tell people what this is about. They can come and say what they want here, and then we go from there. So I would suggest we put this on future agenda items, and we vote on it, and we go from there, and therefore legitimize, unless there's some kind of a time constraint, that I'm willing to take comments from the community.
Another month. That's the only time. It's another month till the next board meeting. Again, I have no problem, my one opinion, in you doing some exploratory work and saving a month. But if you wanna talk about it, a month from now,
Are we
the next
ignoring
board
my
meeting.
suggestion to
Then-
appoint a liaison or suggest a liaison committee that could begin meeting with these people immediately and then have an agendized report at the next board meeting? Is that not a viable solution?
I'm open to either one. I've proposed both, but to me, it sounds like there's.
We have to do a cost and benefit analysis. Is there, Ms. Costan, is there something is time of the essence, or Jackie, is time of the essence when it comes to this?
Well, the point of contact has already been identified 4 months ago by the Acton Town Council, and that information was transferred from me to the school board. So we know who the entity is that we have to contact, and it's Caltrans, not the county. And so, time is.
Who didn't go to the school board? I never heard about this.
This is where a
School district.
liaison comes in
I misspoke.
and shares
School
this.
district, school district, not
Okay.
school board, I apologize. And it was at the time when we were transitioning from
Mr. Scarlett.
yes, so there's no fault here, it's just that, within the last 2 days, another car rolled through the stop sign, almost hit the crossing guide there on Crown Valley and Sierra Highway.
We're talking about two different things. Look, I'm gonna ask for a consensus right now in regard to the safe routes to the school, safe routes for children. Do we have a consensus for you to do everything in regard to that and pursue that? So I'm asking for a consensus. Mine is
Got
aye.
mine.
Let's formalize this process, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Aye, Larry?
Yes,
Okay, we're done with that. You have full authority to go and pursue anything that has to do with safe traffic improvement and safe routes, okay? Now, let's move on to the,
Mr. President, can I suggest that along with the superintendent comments, new construction, that this gets its own tab on every agenda until there's some action,
absolutely, yeah.
some meaningful
In
action?
10.0.
So what the public can expect is, when every board meeting comes up, that this will be its own tab and there will be an update, and I need to know that. I
Okay,
really
so
do.
as 10.4 from now on, let's have, before the new construction, let's have a report on
Safe routes.
safe routes, and, there could be no report, just sometimes there's no report on new construction. Now, the second issue we're gonna move on to here is that, is there, Jackie or Ms. Costan, is time of the essence that, you would say that, let's not do this the proper way that it should be done and have it voted on. Let's just go and do this right now, because otherwise, it's something we're gonna miss out an opportunity in regard to joint use. Can we wait for joint use to go to January for it to be voted on properly and posted, so it legitimizes this process?
I would never, ever suggest we pursue a course of action that's inappropriate. So whatever course of action this board deems is appropriate, I will support. I am just grateful that the issue will be addressed, and as I said, I don't know how long the pot of money for the extra 25% will last. I believe it'll be there through January. So, and I would never advocate doing something that's characterized as incorrect by you or the board. So obviously, I would support the appropriate course of action that this board has, since it moves in that direction.
Okay, is there the money that you were saying, is there any chance that by agendizing this item and by allowing the community a chance to have input on it, whether we pursue this or not, okay? Because I don't need to get input from the community in regard to safe routes to school. And in fact, if there was opposition to it, I would ignore it. That's a no-brainer. That has to do with safety, okay? As far as this, are we taking any risk? And Ms. Costan and Lee, are we taking is there any issue with agendizing this item as opposed to just exploring it without a proper vote?
I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't see that there would be any problem that we would lose funding if we delay this for a month. for a
Okay,
proper
Lee,
vote.
I have no knowledge of this at all, so I
okay,
can't
and Tracy?
Yeah, I'm more with the Safe Routes to School, so this is, I think this sounds like it's the joint use pool.
The safe routes we're doing
Yeah,
immediately.
so, yeah, I'm not involved with the joint use, just the
Okay,
safe routes.
okay. Anything else?
Should I make my points?
Go ahead.
I think they're valid. Bear with me here. In my capacity at work, about two and a quarter years ago, the county approached our city manager. The city manager said, participate in this. That means you participate in it or you lose your job. I was the Parks and Urban Forest Manager, meaning that I ran all the parks in town. I was the head administrator as well as the tree program. And there's lots of talk in town right now, and I think some of the anticipations that there's funding available. If you attended our last budget meeting, you heard that we've got $4 million of the projects on the table with phase 3 and Acton School, and now we're having to go back and value engineer those through bid and alternate bid items because the pot isn't $4 million. So of course, when you got the lid off of projects and you want to look for an alternative funding source, of course you're going to do that. And if you see something like this, it may appear to be attractive. But the layperson might not fully understand what's going on here. And because of the position I hold in my professional career, I can shed some light on this. It started off with the county wanted to do a spatial analysis of recreation and public facilities, meaning this building is right here, this school is right here, this park is right here. They also wanted to identify the amenities. Is there a playground? Is there a 2 to 5? Is there a 5 to 12 playground? Is there a baseball field? Are there 3 baseball fields? So they wanted to identify those things and spatially associate that with GPS technology that says, this is here. And then they wanted to know what condition each of these amenities in. Is it good? Is it fair? Or does it require replacement? Now, as staff members, you have to remember, and this is relative to our staff, you don't feed that information chain with your pet projects as a staff member. That's very dangerous for you to do. But what you do is you identify your stuff, relate what condition it's in. Now, the thought process behind this was, if you have stuff that's in bad shape, they were looking at, well, you need some funds to update, modernize, or do these things. Also, once all that was done, you have a data structure that is spatially related to a database that says, I have and it's compared to population density. So, if you're in Norwalk, some magic thing says for every X thousands of people, I need a library or a walking track or a playground. And so they're spatially analyzing these things in comparison to population centers. And so there's 2 things that come out of this. First is modernization or upgrades to existing facilities. And next is either expansion of facilities or, you okay over there, guys? Or you're going to build new construction, which is exactly what is coming up here. So once that was all done, the county identified there's some need. Well, guess what was behind this? They're pushing for a bond measure. Everybody knows that, right? They don't just come out and ask if you're happy for no reason. Then they had a series of charrettes, meaning the public was invited in. You put your dot on the board. I want a tiddlywink center that's of Olympic capacity or whatever. And based on that, they went back and said, look, here's the need of upgrade, here's the need of new facilities, and here's what's represented. Again, if you're in Norwalk, 27,000 people want an Olympic-sized swimming pool. But over here, it would be pretty easy for me to grab myself and my 6 supporters and go say, I want Tiddlywink Center, and 2 other people show up. Well, the county's smart enough to know, based on population density, if you're going to put a bond out there and you're going to charge taxes, they want the biggest impact to the highest number of people immediately. So that said, we're at a point now where the funding has been put in place because the bond did pass, and the money is there. So what I'm interested in is, rather than this having the loose character it has right now, we're not really sure who's driving the process or who's in charge of it, is this. First off, the county should be reached out to and brought in, and the person that runs this, I don't think it's Catherine Barger, she's not gonna show up as sales, but I'm sure she's got somebody running this program. I've noticed that Ms. Barger's office is not shy about sending representatives. I was at a meeting last night and they were there, and they're always there, and I think if you ask them to come in, they'll come in. What I would be interested right now is knowing that there's, seems to be a lot of fervor about this. Do you have the pool designed? Is there a design for the pool? Is it ready to build? Do you have the property that you're gonna put the pool on? What does it cost? And is there any sharing? Because if we got $4 million on the table right now of projects we're looking to make sure we have budget capacity for, and I want a $30 million aquatic center, what's our share on that? Are they gonna give that to us? And exactly where is this process right now? Put your finger on it. Tomorrow morning, when does this pool open? And if the high school gym is any indicator, or the high school itself, it's down the road. But I can't sit here and say that, you know, just because my job gave me a better look into this than anything else. But we need to know what those parameters are. Once we know what those are, then I'm gonna wanna know a couple things more. What are the program controls? So what that means is, for example, right now, let's say the new gym has 15 hours a week of basketball going on. During the budget study, I asked the superintendent through our facilities consultant, Mike Arona, to establish a by facility, a maintenance matrix that says what needs to be done, what's the frequency it needs to be done at, and what the labor load and cost is. That way when you have budget fluctuations and it's time to say, we can't do that as much as we'd like to, or we know we could improve this, it allows you to do that in a fairly numeric and efficient method. So, are there program controls? That means if my gym is getting 15 hours a week of basketball, it needs to be slightly sanded once a year and totally refinished every 3 years. If I increase that load by the county coming in and wanting to use our facility to the tune of 120 hours a week, which may benefit us financially greatly, I'm gonna wanna know, can we maintain the asset to the point where it's not being run into the ground like playing soccer on a baseball field is a good example of that. So once I know those controls are in place and identified, and these are questions you can ask them, then it's about supports. And those supports are things like, is there going to be a recreation and parks person who opens and closes the bathroom at Acton Park? It's a recreation supervisor that's coming in out of Palmdale. So are we going to have to staff it? Are we gonna have labor load with that? What exactly is that going to be? And if there's going to be basketball games, and I hate to make this joke, but what's the most dangerous sport in the world?
Basketball.
Yeah, at a Mormon church, ask me, I know. So anyway, when there's basketball games, when there's big crowds, when you've got all this stuff going on, is it possible that the county may offer some type of support in terms of increased sheriff's department presence? We would want to know that. So we got a lot of people coming in, because a lot of people are coming in, need to come in to make this a good funding source. And so now we're at a point where we can talk to the community and say, what are you going to do to maintain our stuff so our asset is maintained, the value of it doesn't go down? And all that aside, then it's time to go to the community and say, hey, look, the county's got this, they're willing to pay for this, our cost share is nothing, or it's this. Because if there is a cost share, the only way to get that is substantial. Is probably, is anyone talking about a bond here? Is that what we're going to try to push through the community? I'm not hearing that. But if there is a cost, where's the cost coming from? So all these things need to be formalized for us to be able to then go to the community and say, this is not just a pipe dream, something can actually happen, and here's how your community integrity is protected and supported. Once it gets to that, then it's time to think about things like, what would you do with an Olympic-sized pool? What are the opportunities, especially when it comes to funding? You might hold regional swim meets. You might have someone that comes in, they have some very competitive swim teams. Neptune is down in Orange County. They may want to use your facility. So now all of a sudden you've got your maintenance in order, you've got your supports in order, you've got your controls in order, everything's ready to go. But guess what? When you start having big swim meets here, they're gonna bring in all these people and all these funding opportunities. What do they like to do when they're here for the weekend? You start off with your qualifier at 9 in the morning, you go for your finals at 3. What do we have here for those people? Do they sit at Acton Park all day? Are there any lodging? We've got a moratorium on drive-throughs. That is what it is. We need to protect the integrity of our community and what it means to us. But is there anywhere to eat? Is there anywhere to shop? And what is here that will draw in the big crowds that are going to make this a moneymaker? I don't know that they're here. So it gets to a point where you get to the community and you say, here's what's out there, here's the reality, now do you support that? What I'm interested in is putting this on the agenda and calling in someone from the county that we can ask those questions, get a staff report, and say, here's some of the basics that we're talking about. So we are talking about reality, and here's a time frame and a basic fiscal scenario that goes with that. I would fully support that, but again, let's formalize this. I think at the end of the day, now that I'm done, both issues should be put on the agenda so the public knows. But I'm not interested in having the county just talk to us on the phone. I'm really interested in getting someone in here that can speak to what the program is, what's available, address the concerns the community has about money running out, when it's going to be available, and that type of thing. So I would say let's formalize this, it's time.
Okay, so for the second time, we have given consensus for the second time to Jackie in regard to the safe routes to school, because recently you brought it up, and when you were here, I think two meetings ago, when Mark was here, he brought it up in his board member comments. We had a consensus at that point. So again, we have full consensus. Anything having to do with safe routes, pursue it as much as you want. In regard to joint use, Yolanda, please put it on the next board meeting. We will vote on it. We'll have the community have a chance to get involved in it and have any comments they have in regard to us going towards this. Okay, and we will vote on it at the proper time, and if there's anything I've learned from Larry is to really allow the community to have their chance to know what the agenda is, to post it properly, to post it in time, and most times they don't care, but it's got to be done properly. And I want to do it properly, and if I'm accused of doing it improper, waiting because I want to do it the way we're supposed to do it legally, then be it. Once you put it on the agenda, I plan to support it and vote for it.
That's why we brought it up, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, are you at all interested in giving this its own regular tab until we come to some type of, we got to hold ourselves to the fire.
I think that as far as the liaison committee that you mentioned, that's something we can have as a part of discussion. We had way too much discussion for this right now. We're kind of going in the weeds, and I think you brought up some excellent points. You certainly will be very qualified to be on such a committee, and if we have consensus in regard to that, we can do that. But I think the superintendent,
We've got direction.
yeah, I think you know what to do, and anybody that wants to come here and get us to pursue anything, it's got to be agendized on the thing, and like I said, when this is up for vote, I plan on supporting it.
So you want me to continue with superintendent comments?
If you have anything else, please. Thank you.
So the next thing is that I want to thank Ms. McCauley. She's done a great job with our social media piece, keeping up the Facebook page, which has really been revamped quite a bit. If you go to our website, you'll find that the pictures, the videos, the commentary is all current. So I want to really, again, thank Ms. McCauley for keeping that up and keeping us current, and we're going to continue to grow that. And the next step on our social media plan will be the Twitter account. So our next step will be to add that to it so that when we're at a football game or a basketball game, there can be immediate communication of the event, or a photograph, or whatever the case may be, or a link to a speech, or whatever the case is. So we want to get that piece going. I do want to comment again that we honored retiring Dimas Leonidas, who was a custodian for 13 years with the school district, approximately 9 years in Agua Dulce, and approximately 2.5 years at Meadowlark. I want to commend Meadowlark and Ms. Coleman. They did an outstanding job today, and the staff honoring his service in the school district and at the school. And your students were behaved wonderfully. It was just great to see. It was a really good feel in the climate of the school. And I was lucky enough to stay for dismissal, which I enjoyed very much, because I love being at the,
Were you on the
it's
valet?
it's on, you know, those are highlights to me, opening and closings of the school day and watching parents leave and come and go with their children, and so I always enjoy that, ironically. Onboarding and exiting interviews with the superintendent, just letting the board know that I worked with personnel, so I will meet with every new hire, and that's what I've been doing, and I'll also meet with everybody who is retiring or resigning from the school district so that I understand the good, bad, and the ugly. So if they have thoughts to share on their way out, we need to know that so that we can better ourselves and improve and grow. And we know what we're doing right and what's working. That's important information too. Something that's very important to me almost from the moment I got here is to look at our safety, life and safety issues and health and welfare for our students. And in light of that, I'm looking very closely at our active shooter preparedness, what we've done to date. I've been analyzing that, and I'm looking at next steps and working closely with our extended cabinet. I think Mr. DeVoe, you were looking into reaching out through law enforcement agencies and through the county to see what kind of no-cost resources are available to get some training for our staff. It's very important that our staff feels comfortable, God forbid, in the event of an active shooter incident, to know what to do, where to go, and how to protect our students. And unfortunately, there's a myriad of experience out there on that now and a lot of research. And I say unfortunately because in the last 20 years, it's unfathomable that this is where we would be, but it is our reality. So that is a high priority for me to continue to work on that. Tomorrow I wanted to, I think, Loker already spoke to it, but I will be in Ms. Mustafa's class at 2 p.m. and board members are welcome to join if you happen to be in the area. And a couple other events I wanted to tell you about is we'll be at Meadowlark at 11 a.m. on Monday. When I say we, Ms. Jennings, Ms. McCulley, myself, will be making potato pancakes, otherwise known as latkes, a Jewish treat for those who are of the Jewish faith, and they go along with Hanukkah. And so we're going to put some dreidels out and some chocolate Hanukkah gelt. And so Tuesday is 10:30 at High Desert and 11 o'clock at Vasquez High School on Wednesday. And then Friday's our holiday party at the district office. Okay, so Friday we're at the district office at 11:30 again with the crew. And so you're welcome to join for any or all of those events. And I look forward to visiting our sites at those times. The last thing is that we just finished our branding of the district. So in your, I left you some things in the closed session room this evening. One of them is a set of business cards that I don't know if the board members had those in the past, but you'll now have business cards, and so you'll see the branding of the district on those that maintains the traditional school bell and the seal and so on, but adds kind of a new high-tech piece to it as well. So we're trying to blend the old with the new and maintain tradition and history. And so that'll also come out in a newsletter. So I brought with me, you'll receive fresh off the presses, the first copy of the superintendent's newsletter. So I'll leave this with you tonight. And then between, I guess, Friday or Monday, we'll distribute to all of our school sites and have those available for all of our parents and staff and community. So let me pass these down. And with that, I will say happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and just have a safe, peaceful, restful, enjoyable holiday break.
Oh, beautiful. very much.
You're welcome.
And I'm really happy to hear that you are revisiting the whole active shooter thing. And we did that about, I think, 6 or 7 years ago, and I think it's great that you're doing that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next thing, we have board member comments. I'll start with Mr. Layton.
Yes, I only have one area of comments this evening, and that is required to report out for the CSBA convention that I attended. It was, I left here on a Tuesday to go there for a first session on on Wednesday. They have 3 special classes that you can go through, 3 sessions. If you're going to be a president here on the board, if you're a new board member, I was really sorry that we couldn't have had our new one there, but it was premature. And what they call the legal symposium, and of course, being an attorney, that's my forte. The big difference on this CSBA convention for me this time, and it's a very pleasant difference. I think I've missed 2 in the last 10 years. The first one, I had 1 board member with me, and on the last one, I had 1 board member with me. All the rest, I was there alone. This time, we had a majority of the board at the CSBA convention, and we had numerous activities together, not doing any board business, we're not allowed to do that, but actually starting on Wednesday at the legal symposium, Mr. King was with me, and I was there, and so some of the things that we did cover in that session, I'm not going to go over just the subject matter. We had some stuff on special education matters. There was some, and some of this might have gone into the other days, protecting students impacted by immigration status. And actually my favorite for the day was federal legislative updates. There was also some Brown Act updates, and the main difference that I learned to really appreciate was you said that we would build relationships by having all the board members there. I heard what you said, I heard the words, but to experience it was out of this world. And so I believe, without going into details, that our district benefited by the many, many things that occurred during those 5 days, because then Thursday was when all the other sessions started, and it went on for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I think that I have covered enough on reporting out. Perhaps some of the other board members or yourself will have more of a report out, but I commend you for putting it all together, and I feel it was well worth attending, and that's about it for now.
You're welcome.
And
That was great.
I don't have any other board member comments.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Ken, are you going to report on CSBA? Because if you remember, the superintendent asked us to.
I'll run through this very quickly. Guys, sorry about the other me going on and on about the joint powers agreement, but I think when you watch the movie, I think it will save a lot of time. And I think when you're dealing with the county, whoever is, and you're putting those issues out there right away, they'll understand that you're serious and you're really looking at considering this stuff. So captured that in the minutes. I was looking to formalize the JUA, I'm used to calling it JPA, by asking a county representative to come in here and cover the framework in an open community meeting. I'll start off by saying, and I'll break this brief, Mike Fox, thank you for serving as president for the last year. Thank you for, there's been a bunch of transitional stuff. We're going through some changes in the staff, some changes in the superintendent, and the facilities things and all that. So I want to thank you for your service to the district on behalf of the community that voted for me. Next, Ms. Jensen, welcome to the board. We're happy to have you with your expertise. I want to thank the people that participated in the process. There are several the different skill sets. You saw them in discussion tonight. Mr. Wessel, if I could encourage you to do anything, this JPA thing and the issues I was talking about, maintenance loads and all that kind of thing, you can take me to school all day long. I would really like if you would keep your eye on that as a member of the public. I love the staff movies, guys, where I'm seeing, I forgot that you could measure things by putting it in water. I want to know how big my car is, so that swimming pool, that JPA swimming pool will be exactly what I need to measure the volume in my car. I'm looking forward to the download of the SBCA meeting, or CSBA meeting. I think Mr. King is going to formally agendize that, and we can each talk about our thing there. But thank you, Larry, for keeping us timely on that and encouraging that along with your comments. The ASMO concert series is Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday at Meadowlark School. If you don't go to that, you got a huge problem that you need to fix immediately. Mr. Demas, wow, what a great employee. It just speaks to the kind of employees that we have and the dedication they have at this district. And there today, it was good for the kids. All of the kids were there. They all know him, they love him, they were running up. And so, while our kids are safe in the classrooms with the teachers, our staff that we don't always recognize, things just happen, and it's really sad that we're gonna miss him. I don't even know that he's replaceable. On a personal note, he would take Tammy, who can't talk, and you know her limitations, to a piano every day and play for her. So not only is he a great employee, but he is the ultimate human being in my book. That's it. Happy holidays to staff. Take a break from the wonderful work you do for the district.
Ken, thank you. Just a reminder, you're legally required to make a report on CSBA, and if you'd like to do it next board meeting, you're welcome to. Or you can just make a short report on the classes and things you want to, like Larry did.
Very quickly then, my focus was on charters. My focus was on, so there was what we look at in petitions, what we look at in oversight, what best practices there are. Of course, there's some different opinions there. If I were to go to the charter school annual convention, it might be different, but there was some good framework there. And I encourage people to be objective in the way they were putting information out. I also attended some stuff about special education when those cases start coming into closed session, the kinds of things that you would ask questions about child find. And it basically points to, if you're cognizant of the supports that your staff needs and you're encouraging them to be realistic in their assessments of students and being honest with parents that even sometimes they're in denial about their own child, that it's our responsibility to support the staff in those efforts. So, yeah, a lot of charter stuff. I went to one about formulating the LCAP that was very important. I understand very little about all that, so I got a little tad bit of what I'm still learning how to count to 10 while Lynn David is running the budget here. So it was a good experience for me. Thank you. I think that was.
Thank you, Mr. Pfalzgraf. Mr. Fox?
No, welcome, Ms. Jensen, and just for the, I don't wanna reopen it, but just for clarification, I don't think there's anything wrong in giving consensus to a superintendent to look into something. Having said that, we can wait, and we'll vote to do the same thing next meeting. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. Ms. Jensen?
Yeah, I have a few things to say. First of all, I want to publicly recognize Mr. Distaso for all the work that he's done over the last few years. He was actually a board member when my kids were going to school here, so I appreciate all of the service. I want to thank Wendy Barnes and her culinary arts students for the wonderful refreshments. I think I have a few pounds on my waistline because of Wendy Barnes, but I appreciate that. The herd performers, there's nothing better for me than to see students perform. That's where my heart is. So that was good enough for me to come tonight just to hear the performers. Those students were amazing. Also, I want to recognize, Melissa, I want to recognize your presentation this evening. If you've been in the classroom, I just hope that everyone knows it is not a teacher, how difficult it is to have a brand new language arts adoption when you're teaching reading and to be able to get science in. Many classrooms don't get the opportunity to have science lessons because teachers are spread so thin. So I've seen the last few months lots of science, and I really am excited to see that students are participating in NGSS. I really appreciate that. I'll be attending Meadowlark concert next week. I've been invited. Mr. Pfalzgraf, I think you're going to give me a ticket, maybe?
Yes.
Because I'm really nice to you. So
Even if you're not.
Even if I'm not. So I look forward to going to that concert. That's where my heart is, to see the students. So with that, I'd just like to wish everyone a happy holiday. I know that how hard our teachers and our classified staff work every day for our students, and so I appreciate all of you, and I hope that you get some rest.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. I'll start out by welcoming Ms. Jensen to the board. Thank you for putting your hat in the ring, and thank you for your service. It was very clear to me that you were by far the most qualified individual, and we're just very fortunate to have you. Thank you. And I think just your board comments right now just show the type of board member you're going to be. As far as the herd goes, Ms. Cesari has taken, I think 5 or 6 of these kids right here tonight I have known since they were 5 years old, and that's just really special. And she's taken some of these kids that, were shy and kind of not outgoing, and just really made them better people. And that doesn't come easy, to be that type of a coach. And I just really want to thank her for that. I want to thank, the kids, like I said, kids like Garrett and Blake Musel and Joey Thibault, Kelly, Katie, these different kids, I've known for a long time. We're just really special seeing them here tonight. And please, send my regards and thanks to Ms. Cesari. And thank you, Mr. King, for having them here tonight. That was a very nice touch. Okay. I want to, like I said when Mark was up here, just my hat is really off to Mark, and again, I want to repeat, I feel no one has done more for the district than Mr. Distaso, paid or unpaid, and I'm sad to see him go. I've learned a lot from him, and like I said about Mr. Cesari making those kids better people, he has made me a better person, and he's a great example to look up to. I want to thank my board members for selecting me to serve as the president this year. I've done this job twice before, and I will do my best to be very inclusive in all ways, and I will reach out to each board member before each meeting, and as one of the privileges of the president is to put together the budget, to put together the agenda for the meetings. I will not be exclusive in that process, and I will include any of the board members that wants anything on the agenda. I'm open to full consideration of that. I would ask the support of my board members, my fellow board members, in my goal, my top priority, which is to have a safe and inclusive environment for each and every student at the school. That's just very important to me, and these are not just words. I'm talking about fostering the kind of environment and policies that will deliver that. As far as the classes at the CSBA, I attended the CSBA for my 3rd time. First time back in '08 with Mr. Layton. Again last year with Mr. Layton, and this year with Mr. Layton, Mr. Pfalzgraf, Ms. Fisher, Yolanda, and Mr. King. I think it's a very beneficial conference where there's two basic things. You have a lot of different classes and many different subjects. Each day you have 5 different classes. So we had like some 14-hour days. you know, like, I think Friday was a 14-hour day for us. We're all together from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. And it's a lot of work. If you have a strong work ethic and you apply yourself, you can go to 4 or 5 classes per day. And I did that. I will give a list of some of the classes. But I think also another great part for the staff is that there is a full convention floor with all kinds of different products and everything related to education, coming from artificial turf, you know, for the football field, all the way to the different ways to combat, different tools to combat bullying online, and, you know, anything you can imagine having to do with education is inside this huge convention center, and that was just a great thing to be a part of. I didn't spend much time there. What I spent most of my time was on classes, and I took a class for presidents, and you know, it's the class was mainly focused on how to foster an environment of inclusion, how to not allow, you know, to respect different people when they have the floor, and not to have, and also an understanding a very, very important thing, and I think this is something Mr. Layton mentioned a few days ago. You can have one person on the board that just knows everything, or is really, really strong in all kinds of ways, and that can be a really good thing, but for that one person, the way the process is supposed to work and what they were telling us in the class is that we are not, we're not an organization with authority at the very top where we decide what happens to the school. We are an arm of the government, of LACO, of Sacramento, you know, and of the federal government. And that's the oath that she just took right now. And so what the government wants is that 5 of us equally involved as 20% each, equally involved, and they were teaching me different ways to foster that type of an environment. So what the government wants is all of us with equal input. Not one person monopolizing the situation, not one person having more say. If we're dumber, but we're more closer to the 20% each way of input, that's what the government expects from us. Not 4 people or 3 people not having much influence, but here's 2 brilliant people running the show. That might be the best for, you know, Ed and Larry's ice cream shop. That might be best for whatever, but what is legally mandated that we do is foster an environment where an accurate representation for each board member takes place. And that's what I'm going to work more and more towards. And that's a part of the system of checks and balances that the state and the federal government wants. They're not interested in a more functional board or something that just gets done. They want a system of checks and balances. It's because they don't want Mr. King to be the king. So that's what that's about, okay? So I took that class. I took a class on LCAP and LCFF, and which made me appreciate Ms. David and how she kind of took charge in this department and how much she's done for us in the past, because it's a very complicated process of funding schools, which changed about, what, 6 years ago?
14, 15.
Okay, well, that far ago, okay. And so LCAP and LCFF, I took a class on that. I took a class on charters with focus on the Shasta ruling. I took a class on the Brown Act. And the Brown Act would be basically that me and Mike don't get together with Larry and say, let these other 2, you know, go on until they're foaming at the mouth. We're voting this way. Any agenda item or anything like that, as far as in regard to the Brown Act, I can talk to Mike, that's it. Or I can talk to Kelly. I can't talk to the majority of the board. All of that has to be done out in the open. Another thing about the Brown Act, and also as a part of the president class, that they made great emphasis on, and it happened tonight, is not to pass action items through consensus, to agendize them. And if in doubt, agendize. That's what they kept saying. If in doubt, agendize. Allow the community, so you know, you ask for consensus, it's about, do we want to meet next week for a special board meeting? Okay, do we want to meet next week at Meadowlark instead of here? That's consensus. The type of thing we're trying to do tonight at the CSBA, I was taught not to do it that way.
Sure.
Okay, so that was a part of the President's class and the Brown Act class. So when in doubt, agendize, that's what they kept saying. Consensus for scheduling, consensus for agreement on, even they brought up, even if you're trying to paint the school a different color, even that's gotta be agendized. Consensus is just for scheduling and for those types of things, not for direction to the superintendent about anything.
Correct.
It's all agendized, okay, and that's what I was doing tonight. Lee, I'm sure, you know, a different version of that is gonna be relayed to Mark and other people, but that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to do it the right way that I was taught. And we also had I also went to a class in regard to closed session, what to report out of closed session and what to discuss in closed session. Also how closed session items must be agendized. Again, we hear a lot of times from Larry, oh, we can't be talking about this in closed session, it's not agendized. People out there don't know that in there we're talking about that, even though they're not gonna hear all of it. He's right, okay, happens to be. And the final thing is something another class I went to on IEPs, and the final thing was about special ed, and that class, Larry and Ken and I attended together. It was a great class. So that's what we did at CSBA. Thank you for arranging that, Mr. King. And the final thing I want to bring up as board member comments is and correspondence I got from a constituent. Here's what she writes. Middle school children at the library. Our beautiful library is being used as a latchkey operation from the middle school children. I don't know if Mike knows about this or not.
I don't know about that email, but.
Do you know about the situation?
Yes.
So this is what she's saying. This in itself will be a good thing if they came and used the library as it is intended. Instead of studying, they destroy. They run screaming. I'm just saying what the constituents sent me. They run screaming through the building. They have fights. The bathrooms have to be kept locked the entire time they're there because they destroy them. The kitchen has to be kept locked because they squirted dish soap all over multiple times. They have food fights. They throw books. The parents pick them up when the library closes. There's a special sheriff who once in a while pops in whenever he can, but it's not his job to ride roughshod over a bunch of unruly children. Nor is the librarian's job either. What can be done about that? Here's what I wrote back to her in reply, and I told her I'd bring it up tonight, so I am. I said, Sandy, oops, that's her name. I will bring up your concerns at the school board meeting tonight and try to help the situation. We have even had a board member who was very upset with the kids at the library, so we understand what's going on. For whatever it's worth, I've been there during those hours and I have not firsthand witnessed any misbehavior. Perhaps they know who I am. The problem is this: after 2:40 p.m. we do not have any authority over them as the school district, and we cannot take into consideration nor discipline them for anything they do outside of school hours in a negative manner unless it's a documented criminal offense. However, having said that, I will bring it up tonight at the board meeting.
So, may I just, because the board member you're referring to was me.
That's you.
I received a similar complaint last year, and I actually camped out at the library after hours. And some, different days is different experiences, but that has certainly happened.
Yeah.
And in fact, Miss Lytle and Miss David and myself, and I reported this out some time ago, but people forget, attended a meeting with the library staff.
I supported what you did.
Yes, and so all I'm trying to, the reason I'm recounting this is, folks, it's their shop. We offered to share with them some of the tools we use for discipline and for engaging children. But ultimately, and they recognize this, no, this is our job. And if the community is unhappy, I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble, you have to talk to to the librarian or the librarian's boss. Because they're really the ones who are running the ground rules there. And I, for one, told them, well, you know what, if you want to kick out or instill some discipline and have kids removed from the library, and you're worried about community blowback, as a school board member, I'll back you. Okay? I will go to town council meetings when parents get angry. They get angry in here, I'll support the library people. But really, they have got to want to address the problem. And there is a problem there. A library is a wonderful thing. It should be used for appropriate purposes, and sometimes it is not. It's not. The kids aren't in there studying many times. They're, throwing their water bottles around and running in and out. All these things are true. But the school district, it's not our jurisdiction. And so your reply was right on. And I'll tell you, we had this meeting. I had this meeting with the librarian at the time and their boss. And they said, okay, terrific. We'll start, we have rules posted. We're going to start enforcing them. Ms. David pointed out that consistency is everything. I understand the frustration to the point that I took a day off of school to case the place out, off of work, and another day off of work to meet with the library staff. And I kind of felt like I broke my pick on it because it really is, it's their shop, and we've made every effort, and we continue to make every effort to share with them the tools we use, both positive, I remember Miss David saying, and negative. And in fact, to help identify students if they need some identification help so that they can make the proper outreach. But it's really in their court, and because it's brought up, I would say if you're unhappy, you have to contact the library or the library
I
superintendent.
couldn't find his name, but there's a new librarian.
And I'm not trying to throw him
John
under the
something.
bus, but it's their job.
Jim's gone. Jim Wall.
Okay.
Mike's
Jim Wall is the new librarian.
Mike's attempt to reach out and act like, to be a liaison and say, hey, let's work, he was painted out to be.
He was a one-member
the
committee.
boogeyman and everybody else, so, I mean, yeah, it's frustrating.
Thank you for being that one-member.
Okay, I just, this flares up every couple of
Yeah.
years. And then I think the library people clamp down a little bit, then, they're not teachers.
They change
They
staff,
need
too.
some of the skills that teachers have, or somebody there with skills like a teacher. And they don't have that, but that's for them to figure out.
I totally agree with Mike, and that's what I said in my reply back to them. I always reply to him.
That's true. I'm not suggesting your reply was inappropriate, I just
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to
you
feed that
said, you
back.
said you agree with my reply, thank you for that. I think that, one suggestion that was made to me by one of the parents, in another email, was that, look, if the bus went all the way to my home, I wouldn't have, because the bus stops at the library. If the bus went all the way to my home, I would just have the kid go home. So, I know a few years back, 100% of our funding from the feds and the state for our buses were taken away. We chose to continue the service out of the general fund. So we're still providing this service, even though we get no income from the state or from the feds for the busing anymore. Okay? So maybe perhaps we can see if we can drop some of those kids off in another place, or this is an issue I'm bringing to your attention. Although we're not legally responsible, if you could do something, possibly,
There's not, taking nothing away, but I forgot to mention one other thing. And this was made very clear to the library people. Because when we had the meeting, they were kind of feeling torn, like, where would the kids go if not to the library? And they're not allowed at McDonald's anymore unless they're actually purchasing things. And so they purchase it and they take it to the library to eat. But at any rate, we made it clear to the library folks who were a little bit concerned that there'd be no other avenue for the kids that we have, and we had last year, I imagine we still have, an after-school program with transportation that gets kids here where they're supervised by teachers. It is a family-owned, I think they're teachers, we have supervisory staff. What is it?
I think it's the county.
What is the program that's over? I don't want to mistake.
It is a
county
Some
program.
yeah.
It's.
Where's the location, at Meadowlark?
They don't call it daycare, but it's.
Here?
Okay.
But is my point,
Yes,
so I missed.
that's what Brent started. a couple
So-
years ago.
But
Did this
it's my-
not start off
Okay,
being
hold on.
an answer to Title I program improvement in the background of giving people a place in an educational environment where they could have access to materials is how I think this really started 4 or 5 years ago anyway, nonetheless.
So my
All right,
point was, and
yeah.
I apologize for misspeaking, and let's just make sure I get the record straight. I'll ask it as a question. Is there a program here, like we instructed people last year, that, here meaning in town, somewhere on this campus,
Any of our kids.
where students may go after school?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Shi. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, there is a program done through the county where you can register. It's after schools. We send home flyers with our students. That's held in this back.
And is there transportation available from schools to that program?
Yes.
Who can they contact for that?
So, the point I'm making here is this is a family's own decision whether they choose to let their kids hang out at the library or whether they choose to participate in a program that is available. So, you know, there are alternatives. It's not like there's other alternatives. And so I'll just go back to the beginning, which is, does frustrate people. It frustrates me. But enforcement is at the county's level, at the library, and there is an alternative. If anybody, any parents find enforcement is affecting them, and they go, well, what else can I do? There is something else you can do. So that's all. There are alternatives.
Thank you, Mike. Who would they go to, who would they, I'm gonna respond back, who can they contact in order to inquire about that county program at this location?
So the front offices had flyers. I'm sure if you contacted the front office of the schools that the secretaries would be able to help as well as they can contact the county.
Any of the sites and also the office here, right?
Yes, sure.
So, Mr. King, can you make sure that our front offices and our site
Have the information.
have the information? It's good because, you know, I'm gonna reply back to say
Sure.
that, okay?
Okay. You're saying, did I misinform anyone?
Well, I'm just saying that there's some misinformation about who is invited to go to the after-school program,
Okay.
as far as like the age group perhaps.
Oh, perhaps it's age group sensitive.
So you can have like first graders with seniors, I get it, yeah. So what is the current situation?
I don't know what the current situation is, but I think
So,
in the past it's
so
been elementary school.
I threw it out there, so.
So you're saying that's something we should address?
Just let,
No,
why don't
time
we,
out.
let's staff just take.
It's
we can
K
have
what?
it.
K-8.
It's a K-8 program. We're talking about junior high kids. They fit in the K-8 window. So yeah, there's a different variety of kids, but the program that the county runs is a K-8 program and is available. That's all I'm saying, okay? People have a choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Has my kid been reported to be a problem in this area?
Let me, Mr. President, let me extend just because we
I'm
opened up.
still trying to finish my board member.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
If Mike, that's it.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm just joking, go ahead.
No, I was
I'm
just,
done.
because we opened the can of CSB, I just want to close it,
Yeah.
finish it. Because we were going to agendize that for January, but since it got open, I'll go with that. So I just want to share a couple of things on CSBA, and Ms. Fisher, as I'm sharing, and Ms. McCauley, if you think of other thoughts, please feel free to add to it. A couple of things is, well, when we did go to the legal symposium with Mr. Layton, enjoyed that very much. It was very informative. The other thing was, one of the highlights for me on the conference was with Mr. Pfalzgraf and Mr. Porter. It was called a small rural district school luncheon, and the presenter was talking about diversity in the schools and the variety of students that face bullying and those sorts of things. And Mr. Porter shared, they were talking about 5 criteria that some students may meet, 1 or 2 or 3 of those criteria that affect their development severely, such as abuse. Well, Mr. Porter was transparent and vulnerable enough to share that as a child he experienced all 5 of those criteria, which were pretty severe. So he shared a story about that, about himself. Mr. Pfalzgraf followed up with some comments to I'm just sharing, Mr. Porter, what you had shared at that small little luncheon when you
Okay.
were pretty vulnerable with yourself. So
Oh, thanks.
I just wanted to comment on that because it is the intangibles, as Mr. Layton spoke to, that happen at times like that. Nobody could have predicted that you were going to share that. The speaker was truly caught off guard for a few moments, had to gather herself to continue, and Mr. Pfalzgraf shared some thoughts as well. I really enjoyed being at the conference with all of you. And the other highlight for me was the next day on Friday. Yolanda and I attended an executive assistant, it was a seminar for the day. One particular piece that I wanted to go to was where a colleague of mine was presenting, and so I attended that piece with Yolanda, and it was nice to be together, and it was reassuring to learn that everything that this superintendent and his executive assistant were sharing from the superintendent's office, we've quickly established, I think, in a very short time period, and so that was well, hopefully you feel the same.
I did.
So anyhow, that was great. I appreciate everybody's participation, including Ms. Fisher as well in their time.
And don't you feel that it was very, very beneficial to the district, and one or two ideas could have made back more savings to this district than the cost of probably the everybody being there.
Oh, absolutely. What you learned about ADA, board governance, charter schools, I think it's extremely valuable to go as a team.
And as you said, Mr. Porter just about had everybody at that rural luncheon in tears. And you could have heard a pin drop, and it all came to a screeching halt.
And even what occurred tonight, in terms of, there was a lot of discussion, I knew it took a lot of time to sift out this whole piece on governance in terms of what's consensus, what gets agendized. It's healthy conversation, and it's good, and it's how we grow as a team. So I know it's time consuming, and it's good. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. King. You know, it's a very beneficial conference, and I implore any of my board members to go. Back when we were broke, we stopped going, and I think it's money well spent. The luncheon you're referring to was also an actual study session where they went through children that go through trauma in their childhood, how educators can detect that and how they can mitigate that. And you know, I shared my story. I went through a very, very rough childhood and you know, a great deal of abuse, but I shared that I believed in much of what they were advocating because they worked in my case. And
you had hit all 5 of those.
Yes, there were
triggers.
five areas.
Triggers they talked about.
There were 5 different areas of abuse that a child can go through in their childhood, and all those areas applied to me, and I was able to overcome them, and also make sure that my own child is a child that doesn't have a single one of those areas. And I felt that what they were advocating was very beneficial, and I think it was a very special moment where we all kind of, it was a real moment where, you know, like I say, this study session was for educators, how to detect and how to mitigate those types of situations and the different programs available. And, you know, I spent most of my childhood in Burbank, and there were programs that I benefited from and helped me greatly. So I'm a strong believer in educators continuously reinventing themselves and learning more and staying up to date. So it was a great time, and it was also very nice just to be on a personal level with Larry and Ken and Ms. Fisher and, you know, and Yolanda. It was great that you were there, Yolanda, and she has recently been promoted to the position of executive assistant as opposed to secretary, and I think there were classes for secretaries, there were classes for executive assistants, and she is, you know, to differentiate the two and for the two of you attend classes together, for you to be able to rely on her and include her, in the different sessions you have with staff and on the phone, and it's just a different level of involvement. So it was a great time. Thank you, and thank you again for facilitating that, Mr. King.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna move on to 11.0, to consent agenda. It's recommended that following consent agenda items be approved. 11.1, minutes of the regular board meeting, November 9th, 2017. 11.2, minutes of the special board meeting, November 15th, 2017. We had a special board meeting. And 11.3, warrant register. And 11.4, personnel action report. Thank you, Ken.
Second.
Thank you, Larry. Any discussion in regard to 11.1 through 11.4 consent agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 500. Moving on to 12.1, business and financial, material revision, method K8/912 charter school petition submittal. It's recommended the board accept the material revision petition for method K8/912 charter school. I'll move it in. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Larry.
Just a quick comment on this, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Fisher. So essentially, as I understand it, we're moving towards what might be a change for the board, which is a chance for you to review the material, and then a second step to the process, and I believe it was all in one board meeting previously. So if you want to expand on that a little bit, please.
So as we went through our state audit last year, and we've just kind of been looking at our authorizing practices and how to refine our process, one of the recommendations that came up is that instead of charters being able to just come to the front desk and drop off a petition, that we should have a formal process in place to actually, they have to submit their petitions or material revisions to us, which starts the legal timeline for that. So this is our first one. So Jessica from Method is here tonight. This is not the public hearing. So this is just, she's gonna come up, she's gonna submit it, tell us what it is, and then we'll have 2 weeks to look it over. She'll be back actually January 14th. 11th, not 14th, 11th. And then we'll have the public hearing where you'll be able to ask her questions and she'll actually do a presentation. So it's just a change in formality. So Jessica, if you'd like to come up.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you. I'll be very quick. I'm just submitting the revised petition for Method Schools. It basically covers two main features. One is we've merged the K8 and the 912 together into one single petition for a variety of reasons, which I can explain next time. And then we also address our position on the Shasta ruling for our site in LA County, and our plan is with that. So that's all included here, and I can present that and answer all questions next month, sorry.
So there's 10 here.
And there's 2 documents. Okay, thank you. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's not the joke. It's not the vote. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Larry, just to be sure, I was debriefing Ed because he's just upside for a second. So where we'll be voting tonight, but the vote is merely to accept the petition, not to approve the petition, and it's not the public hearing. We're simply recognizing and
Is the
accepting.
better verbiage that we recognize that the initial submittal was made?
Something like that. We accept the reception or whatever.
The verbiage comes from our recommendation.
So up at the top, it says material revision method K8 charter school petition submittal. So you're only accepting the submission of this material revision. That's it.
Okay.
So we're just recognizing that it was given to us.
Correct.
Yes.
So this, so we're okay to vote on this now?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so we're, 12.1 is recommended that the board accept the submission. Yolanda, can you please insert that into the record? Right after accept, put submission, as Ms. Fisher just said, of the material revision petition for method K through 8. So we're now voting. Did you all receive this?
Yes,
in your
I
hand?
physically
I-
received it.
We received it in our hand. Larry? Larry, aye?
Aye. Aye.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay, we're moving.
Did you get the vote?
Yes,
count?
5-0-0.
Thank you.
Everyone's got it in their hand, and we have accepted the submission of the material revision. 12.2, certification of signatures. Periodically, we have to go through this as there's turnover or change in positions to change the people that sign different documents, checks, and all that. It's recommended that the following personnel be authorized to sign: Mr. King, Ms. Fisher, Ms. David, and those are the 3 new people authorized to sign.
I'll move.
I'll second. Call to order. Aye.
Aye.
12.3, annual developer fee report for 2016-2017 school year. It's recommended that the board enter into a discussion related to the annual developer fee report. So the developer fee is basically what each new construction will pay to build a new house, to build a new McDonald's or feed store or whatever, or if you add on some square footage to your home. As Pam knows, developer fees, we're not getting much from them because there's not much development happening right now. However, the last I remember about this is that we were going to have an official research into if we can increase them or not. So,
And I'll defer to Ms. David to share a little bit on this and also the next item.
Okay, so there's sort of 2 things. One is just, this is, and it's my understanding that you haven't necessarily seen the annual report before, and that's something that is, it's just really, I hate to say it, but a checking off of the box. It's something to comply with the legal requirements of collecting the developer fees. And so what it is it's just a summary of the revenue we collected for developer fees and researching, because obviously I wasn't in that role, but in talking with our staff, it's primarily from last year based on people remodeling their homes and expanding. There are no commercial fees from last year, so there was approximately just a little under $50,000 collected. And the purpose of the report is just so that we're reporting out, and it's something at $50,000 a year, typically what you're doing is saving it for until you have enough to do something more significant. So this is just checking off that box. Now, as far as looking into and doing a school facility need analysis, and looking through all the files and turning over things that had been in a stack, I did find just recently an old one, so we are probably due to work with a consultant who will go through and do the actual needs assessment, which is necessary to, if we want to possibly increase the fees, or we can also use that study as a benefit for requesting
I
funding.
think there's a certain criteria that allows us to do that. If we can look into that, we're at $2.05 right now, and that's probably the lowest in the county, with the exception
Pretty
of
low.
areas in the Antelope Valley. Like, I know parts of LA City are $17. I think Pacific Palisades is like $40 almost. So we have to be able to get it higher, in my opinion. Whatever we can do, and I know it cost about $5,000 the last time we did it. So.
Okay, I'll look into doing it, yes.
I would just add that, and it's because of all the turnover, there's a schedule by, the window opens to do this.
Exactly.
Only on a periodic basis.
Yeah.
So I think the first order of business is to look at when our window opens and make sure that we get our study done.
before the window closes, and we end up rolling another year or two. And that's why we've been encouraging some sense of urgency on this, because we don't wanna miss the
Miss the
window
window, yeah.
and continue to be underfunded relative to people around us.
I think the last study was done in 2015.
Okay, I don't know the
Yeah.
particulars, I don't know
Yeah.
when the so there may be different timeline for studies and for using the studies to actually change the fee structure.
Exactly, exactly.
So I
And
think
this
there's
is,
a little bit more
yeah,
homework that needs to
and this
happen.
is something that was very, important to Mark, and I think, yeah, and I think that, it's important we look into it, and it might be worthy to have some consultation with our legal team also about that. Okay, so thank you for the report, Ms. Davis. 12.4, first interim financial report for the 2017-2018 school year. Looking forward to this. Do I have a move?
I'll move it.
Second.
Larry Layton.
Thank you.
Who's second?
Larry did.
And just a quick comment before Ms. David begins. So as you know, this is part of our legal obligation to report this as part of the annual budget cycle. I just want to remind the board, when we get to the calendar piece coming up, we do have a special board meeting dedicated to delve into the budget more in terms of facilities and options as you directed us to kind of come back to you with. So I'm just letting the board know, kind of, don't feel the need to get too bogged down tonight in that, because we're going to revisit some of those questions in January.
And then even expanding upon that, I believe this report reflects the budget meeting we had back in November.
Yeah.
So really what we're doing here is it should be like Groundhog Day, although in this.
It's formalizing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're just formalizing so we can vote on it.
Yes,
We've
you
been
got
here
it.
before.
Well said, you got it.
All right.
Right.
You haven't been here before.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity, board, superintendent, and guests, to be able to present this to you. It is, as you stated, a report that some of it is going to look familiar to those of you who might have been here the other time. What I would say the difference is between last time and this is the other time we were looking at the budget, at the entire budget, but really focusing more on the funds that we have available for facilities. This time we're looking at all our funds, but really primarily through what is happening in our general fund, which is where most of our transaction and business happens. So if you can go ahead to the next slide. So if you guys will indulge me just a little bit, I'm trying to build a little bit of understanding. It's my understanding that sometimes people look at all the numbers and aren't sure what it all means. And so that creates a little bit of a sense of mistrust or wondering what's going on. So one thing I just want to point out at this point is this is a reporting cycle. It's not something that just stops at this point. So right now we're in the cycle where we are, by December 15th every year, we have to, by law, present the first interim report for the current year. So another thing that's important is it's a cycle, but there's usually at least 2 budgets that are being worked in any district at any given time. The next time you see us, we'll still be talking about this budget and what it means, this current year budget for 17-18, and what that means as far as going through the year and the impact our ending fund balance will have on the next year. But the beginning of January, the governor's budget will be released, and so we're already going to start working on a second budget at the same time. But this tonight is just about where we are at this point in the budget for 17-18. So again, this should look familiar if you were here the other time. There are not just one fund in the district. So when you hear people talk, there are funds. So what we normally talk about is the general fund. That's what most of us talk about. That's where salaries are predominantly paid for, and the general operations of a school district happens. So that's why we have a big pot. That's where most of our money is, and most of our money under LCFF is unrestricted. And I do want to make a clarification. When I said 14-15, Mr. Porter, what I meant, and I should have said 2014-15. So LCFF is relatively new, and it's not. It's really, the money was the same money. It was just packaged differently. So We were very used to the old way, and so we're still getting used to the new way. There is a small amount of money within the general fund that is restricted, hence the little pot in there. So the restricted money has certain purposes, such as Title I, that's trying to help kids catch up who are struggling, transportation, which is still funded, but at a 2012-13 rate, so certain things did not increase. So there's the general fund, which we'll talk about first, and primarily. Another thing to keep in mind about that general fund is that you have to keep a minimum reserve. Right now, we only have to keep a 3% reserve. If we go down to 1,000 ADA, we must have at least 4%. So other funds are restricted and they're for special purposes. Typically in this district, it's for improvements, things like our projects, our maintenance. You can also have our cafeteria funds. So they are for special projects, and the funds are significantly less. So we can go ahead to the next slide. Another thing that's just a basic concept that is really important to trying to make sense of the big messy numbers in that SACS report, if you really like to abuse yourself and look at that, is how LCFF funding is delivered. LCFF, again, it's the same money that we had prior to LCFF, it's just packaged differently. So what we have now is it's our main source of revenue. We used to have a big pot and then lots of little pots. Now it's all together. And so you have a base funding amount per student for every student that goes to our schools. It's an ADA-driven thing. So ADA is your enrollment times how often kids come to school. So if kids are missing school, we're going to get less funding. So it's basically your enrollment times your attendance rate. And just as a number, it's about $50 a day we lose for any child who's absent. So just, we want kids here to learn, but it does impact us at $50 a child. So if they're healthy, we like them here. Additional funding. So we have our base funding, and then adjustments are made at K3. And then also at 9-12. And as a result of that, we need to keep our class sizes at a negotiated size, or 24-1. Our district has a negotiated size. So, so you get about $800 additional for each child in kindergarten through 3rd grade, as long as we meet that. The unduplicated pupil percentage is students who are low-income English learners or foster youth, and you only count the child once. So they could be any one of those things or all 3 of those things, but they're counted one time. That's 20 times the base. So that's about $1,500 per child. So it's really important that we do count those kids, again, for instructional purposes, but also because it drives our funding. So next slide. So here's another thing that would be new. This wasn't in the last slide because we're talking more about construction, but this is a really important concept when we talk about our budget. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about, wow, we were, rolling in money for the last few years, and now we're talking, we're a little more concerned. So when we talk about LCFF, our new money is our gap funding money. So the way that's calculated, if you look into 2014-15, our target entitlement, and I always remember that as target, is what we get when we're fully funded. We won't be fully funded till probably 2021 unless the governor does something different. But at that point, if you said we were going to get $100, at that current year we only got $70. So the gap between what we were supposed to get and what we were getting was $30. And then they apply a formula to that, a percentage. So you got your $30, which was your gap between what you're supposed to get and what you get, times the gap funding percentage, which those are the actual percentages of 30%. So that year in 2014-15, for every $100, a district got $9 new. The next year, the gap between the 100 you're supposed to get and what you were getting was 79, which is a $20, almost $21 gap. They funded it at 50%, which meant that we got $11 new for every 100 we were supposed to get. But what's really important, and I'm not gonna bore you with going all along the side, you can see I tried to color code so you can see where the prior year goes up to the next year. The critical part in this is the bolded one that says gap funding or new money. In the old days, when we talked about COLA, that was our new money. This is our new money. So you can see in 2014-15, we got a lot of new money. We got even more new money in 15-16. In 17-18, even though we're funded at 43%, the gap is smaller, so we only get $1.97 new. And the ones that are projected out for 18-19, that's 66, that's our currently projected gap funding. So it's kind of a like...
This is a great chart. This was what was confusing last time, thank you, or at least to me.
Right, so it's, you know, and what I believe to be true, you know, when we're fully funded, whenever that happens, we'll go back to there is a COLA in the formula, but it's way too, it'll really make your heads spin. But the big picture on this is when you hear about the gap funding percentage, I think there's a misunderstanding in the public that that's how much you get, that that's the new COLA. It's not. It's the number that's applied to the gap. And the smaller the gap is, it doesn't matter, you know, 90% of a dollar is not as much as, 50% of $50. So if you look at that, what happens, the closer we get to being fully funded at the entitlement, we do not get as much new money as we used to. Okay, so this is like a big deal as we move forward into other things. Okay, this is a real quick thing, just why do we even do? What is it and why do we do it? The first interim report is an opportunity for districts to be able to make adjustments. When we build our budget, we say we might need, a certain number of teachers to be rehired. We're guessing at how much they're gonna earn. So when we make adjustments for things like that. And so we make adjustments and update our estimates to more accurate, and we're able to look at what our spending patterns and spending rates are to be able to make trend assessments. And then the really big piece of that is that, again, by state law, looking at this report, the board is responsible and the district is responsible for making one of 3 status ratings, and it's positive, qualified, or negative. Positive is if we can maintain our required minimum reserve this year and 2 out years. Qualified is if you're either going to fall under your required percentage this year or not be able to meet your obligations in one of the out years. And negative is if you will not be able to. You'll see it later, but we are positive. We will be recommending a positive certification. Again, just a very quick reminder of what the district's goals are is our 5-year plan, program enhancements to maintain those, move forward, act in school improvements, deferred maintenance, enhancements, general fund reserve level increases, investigating the joint use agreement, and expanded relationship with other LEAs and charter schools. Now, this is something that we came into. I don't honestly know if that will change or not, but it's what was in place when the budget was built. Okay, next. And stop me at any time. I know it's late, so I'm trying to go quick for you guys. Budget assumptions that were included in the original adopted budget and some changes. Over on the right is what was in 16-17's budget, just so you have kind of frame of reference about what may have changed in our district. So enrollment is at 1072, so we're down a little bit with enrollment compared to prior year. Our ADA, which again is our enrollment times the attendance rate of students, as a result of being slightly lower, is enrollment is also a little lower ADA. Unduplicated pupil count. Remember, that's where we're counting our students who are English learners, foster youth, or low-income students. And that's important because when we count that because those students do need some extra services and support, we do get as a district about $1,500 per student additional. In prior year, we had 46.1% students identified as unduplicated pupils. Our current count was 53.5. And again, I just want to really commend the work that Paulette is doing and the site administrators and the secretaries to make sure that we're counting these students and identifying Again, most importantly because if they need to have a free meal, they have food in their tummies so they can learn. You know, if they need support with learning English or extra support because they're in a foster situation, that's the real reason, because they need those supports. But if we're counting and we're able to collect the money to provide those supports. Another thing that's important is, and you'll see it again in a later slide, is that STRS and PERS rates are increasing annually. That has been included in the budget. What was not in the adopted budget, because the governor had not committed to it and it had not been enacted, was we did add in a first interim one-time funding that was at $170 for ADA. So that was added for first interim. There was the restructuring of DO staff, and that saved some money. We talked about that at the last meeting. We decreased, and this was an adopted budget, the oversight fees for charter schools from 3.5% to 3%. We talked about funds for projects and trying to maintain our general fund reserve or increase it. So this is just a summary. When, as you recall, when we talked the last time, we had gotten a letter from LACO that said that we were not meeting our reserves when they applied some transfers to our adopted budget. And so as a result, we needed to transfer back some money that we had put aside into other funds. We also needed to make various other corrections. So at one point, our ending balance was $168,000 due to programmatic savings, and then also putting back some funds and adding $170,000. We're in a much better place right now. But again, the other thing that's really important in that, and you'll see it later on, is that increase that you're seeing is based on our projected, significantly changed, the projected ADA in our charters. So again, that's kind of volatile, but that's what we're projecting at this point. So we'll have to really keep monitoring that to make sure that it materializes the way we project. So again, the revenue summary, as I noted, our gap funding is, it was at 43.97%. We're 97% of the way to our entitlement target. Title I was slightly decreased, not since adopted budget, but that's just for this year, something compared to the prior year. We did add the one-time funding we talked about. Charter fees were decreased a little bit, and then again, I highlighted the part that it's our projected ADA. So we believe it'll materialize at that level, but we have to really monitor that. Yeah.
Ms. Jensen, we reduced our charter fees from 3.5% to 2.5% to 3%. And the way it was justified at the time was basically in order to remain competitive in the market. So that's where how much did, about $500,000 reduction in our income? Was it quite that much?
300?
I think it was in the threes. I'd have to get back to you on what
Whatever
it
it was,
actually.
yeah, I just want you to understand the reason why we did that.
Yeah, I mean, it was offset by the fact that, as you can see historically from last year, P1, which is actually, that's due to us in the next few days. So they're starting to come in, because when we added those, we physically called every school and said, what's your enrollment and what do you project your ADA to be? P1 last year was at almost 9,000. It increased a little bit by adopted budget, and some of our schools have really blossomed this year according to their ADA. So,
excellent.
Again, the general fund expenditures, things that were included in adopted budget are the things that happen every year. Increased step and column as people move over. Increased cost for STRS and PERS, and I know I keep beating into the ground, but that's increasing for STRS at about 1.5% per year through 2021, and then for PERS at about almost 2% per year. So that's something that's absorbed into the district, because the employees don't pay that, the district does. There's an increase in minimum wage to $11 an hour, starting January 1st. That was included. Reduced cost for reorganization, so that was a reduction in expenditures. The health and welfare is budgeted at the current rate, Professional development is included. We've really, the last couple of years, put a lot of emphasis into doing professional development for staff, and I think they like that. And then our planned actions, which some of them do include professional development or different things, so those are all budgeted in there.
Just wanted to point out two things. One is just to put STRS and PERS and total contributions in perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, but at one point, maybe even lower, but I know when my career started, I think the contribution was maybe 7 or 8% employee contribution. I became a teacher in 1992. Now they're saying that's going to go up to 19% by the time this is said and done.
You keep calling it employee contribution.
Employer contribution, thank you.
Right.
Employer contribution.
And your point
It's
is
us.
that the expense that the state is
It is
requiring
huge.
of us
Yeah.
to keep the pension sound, 'cause it's gotta be sound, is increasing, so it's a real pressure.
Yeah, it's a significant increase, and it's a significant employer contribution, thank you. And then the other piece is there, not a trickle down, but a trickle up, I guess, I don't know, you can't, that's an oxymoron, but, the increase in minimum wage. So what happens is your whole salary schedule for your classified employees gets adjusted, correct? So you have certain, intervals between your salary schedule, between and within cells of salary ranges and salary schedules. So if the minimum wage goes up, other cells could be affected on salary schedules, just.
Yeah, see, to start, we're only making the corrections so that we meet the legal requirement, and then when we go into negotiations, I believe that'll be,
Correct.
do we desire to maintain those intervals?
Yeah. Potentially, it could be very costly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is actually the exciting one, you know, as far as when we get to certify, we actually are able to maintain our reserve levels, at 8.74 for the current year. Goes down just a little bit to 7.8, and the next year, 5.51, and I know last time we had a discussion about, well, why would it drop more in the third year? Part of it is because for the first 2 years, that includes our ELA textbook, which was able to be divided into 2 years, so that it was about $90,000 per year. The third year, we're looking at a potential requirement to adopt, I'm not sure if it's science or social studies. Social studies, that's what we thought we heard. And so we're not sure if we can make that same sort of a negotiation with the vendor, or the publisher at that point in time, so we have to put in what it will probably cost, and then keep our fingers crossed that we can negotiate some sort of a, you know, slower payment plan if we want. The other thing that actually is included in there, I think it's important to mention, is that we did actually make sure to include in each of the out years $100,000 for replacement of technology. Because we know that we literally can't teach anymore without, you know, can't test kids. We rely so heavily on our Chromebooks and our equipment that we wanted to make sure that was in there, so that is, you know, Chromebooks are great, they're not terribly expensive, but they also need to be refreshed, just because they get a lot of student use. And I know teachers do a great job at keeping careful watch on them, but they get 180 days of use. So we actually did project out for years 4 and 5, because we're a small district, and so we will be able to maintain our reserves. So, going on to other funds, what I tried to do is organize this just slightly differently, because it's a little bit different lens than the last time around. I put funds 13 and 17 up in one slide, because those are funds for other than projects. So 13 is our cafeteria fund, and 17 is our reserve not capitalized projects. So in other words, not buildings, not infrastructures. Looking at those, probably the things to look at, the way to read these actually, and they're all the same format, is we have the beginning balance on the first row. That typically doesn't change between adopted budget and first interim. The next 2 lines, revenue and expenditures, you compare those, and then you either have an excess or deficiency in your expenditures. So you're really taking the first line, subtracting the second line, And that ends up to be, and then putting in any transfers in, and then you get your ending balance. So something that's really critical in these, there's no requirement for a percentage. You just can't have a negative ending fund balance. So in cafeteria fund and 17, we've made any corrections we need to expenditures to make sure that we maintain at least $0 in the ending fund balance. Cafeteria, we have a little bit of money to carry into the next year, we project. And then Fund 17, we actually had to take down because we put that money back in to the general fund to cover, because it had been
Ensure
taken
that
out.
It was taken out incorrectly. And
Yeah,
that's
it was
how we
originally
restored
taken
it.
out of general fund, put in here so that we could determine what we needed to do with it and had to go back. Okay. Then the next slide, I tried to put together things that we could pretend that were linked specifically to Vasquez and could not be used for anything else. Fund 21 we talked about last time was expended, that was our bond. And so we made a few corrections because it actually had a negative ending fund balance. So there was just a few dollars left, so we reduced expenditures and reclassified those to a different fund. And we're down to 12 cents by the end of the year, and that closes out the bond. Fund 35 is the matching fund. That's where we're going to be using our money for the Vasquez project that we just got a bid for. And so where it says budgeted total expenditures, that literally is a holding thing. We're basically taking it and saying if we use all of the money available to us currently, we'll have 17 cents when we're done. So
And that's the intent, it's the matching
Precisely.
funds, and we're gonna try to get as much out of it as we can for phase 3.
And then the next, I believe, 3 funds are Fund 14, which is deferred maintenance, which is exactly what it says. That's not day-to-day maintenance, that's things that like you kind of have to save up to do. There is a fund for regular maintenance within the general fund. That's things that you save up. They're bigger projects. Our capital facilities fund, that's where we put our developer fees, and Fund 40, which is what this district is used to save money for Acton. So again, with each of those, there is some projected expenditures, and then at least a general fund balance or a ending fund balance of at least a penny. But in some cases more so, because for example, the deferred maintenance, we really don't want to take it down to a penny. That's where if a main line breaks or a roof needs to be repaired, that's where we would get that money. And same thing with Acton, that money is waiting until we have sufficient to complete our project, until we get some more direction on what it'll really cost. So those are our others. So in summary, the big takeaways are, the good news is that we believe that we can meet our obligations for positive certification. We need to keep in mind that revenue growth, because of LCF funding and the gap, is slower than it was in recent past. Our enrollment is relatively flat and potentially declining slowly. And then we have some reduced oversight fees for charters. STRS and PERS, we've beaten it to death, but that's going to increase. Project costs increased for various reasons, and so we need to look at those capital improvement funds and how we can prioritize to accomplish our goals. The decreasing general fund and depletion of fiscal service. So this is more about cash flow, because right now you can actually always legally borrow temporarily from other funds, the ones that are outside the general fund, for cash flow purposes. Just like in our home, we may borrow our savings account for a short period of time to keep our day-to-day things going. And it's the same thing with this. We can borrow temporarily and then put it back if we need to make sure we can pay bills, because our money doesn't come in equal little amounts. So as we decrease the other things, that may minimize that. And then we can actually meet our reserve level, but we may possibly need to make other adjustments, either up or down, to make sure that we can maintain reserves and continue to increase. It's my understanding that I think the board prefers to have a 10% reserve in a perfect world, and so if that's what the goal is, we need to see where we can continue, look at our coming budget in January and see how that applies to what we have here to accomplish that board goal. And our next steps, as we've talked about, is the governor's budget is released, so we'll start working on a new budget while we're still managing this one. That will be released by January 15th. Project prioritization meeting is coming up, and then on March 8th, you'll get a second interim, which is basically the same process, but it's where we are at the next part of our year. And that would actually result any expenditures through January 31st. So, any questions?
Pardon my callous interruption, but I'm going to be.
Thank you for staying this late.
Thank you.
After your student rep comments, you're welcome to go at any time of your choosing.
Okay. I
Okay,
just thought
and
I'd
you
know
have
I
homework
stayed
and
late.
everything else.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you, look, get some rest. Mr. Layton, any comments? Mr. Fox?
Very nice presentation, always very informative, it's very helpful.
Okay, good. I'm gonna not say I don't wanna feed you
You
for fire.
have to lift the fog.
Okay.
This is David, I've seen lots of presentations and this was very easy to understand, so I appreciate that.
Okay,
So I hope
good.
everyone knows. That's usually a good night story, and you kept people awake, that was great.
Sorry. I just want people, I wanna make it,
It was very easy to understand.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Mr. Pfalzgraf?
Maybe I can change that. A couple quick questions.
all right.
If you know, you know. If you don't, I'll want to know next time. Currently, we were speaking about joint use agreement. How is our budget informed currently to what dollar amount or roughly do current joint use agreements lend to our budget?
I have no idea.
Will you find out?
Well, maybe I can answer the question, maybe, or perhaps the question was, because in previous meetings, we had talked about allocating money for potential joint use agreements, and there is zero allocated.
That's
and-
true.
Okay,
So-
so that's true, and that's on chart, well, it was one of the
So
charts.
what I want to know, just to be clear,
Bless you.
is how much money is coming in right now from joint use agreement?
Zero.
Oh,
I didn't say that.
existing, okay, none,
None.
that I'm aware of.
Okay, so would you document that and let me know? So anything we've got going on at the softball field or anything like that that we're talking about currently, there is no income to the district that you know of right now?
I'll have to get back to you on it,
Cool.
because I know we do
Perfect.
have facility use fees, but as far as
It's not
this is
the same.
specifically under joint
Ken,
use.
for whatever it's worth, I can tell you there's zero money coming in right now.
Well, I want to make sure we confirm that because if there's some dependence on that or some assumed dependence on it, my next question would be.
Not right now.
Is there anything anticipated that's gonna pop up this year that's gonna put money in our budget right now from a joint use agreement that could be developed over the next 2 months? Are we making any of those assumptions?
I don't,
Nothing next
I
You don't
wasn't
have a
gonna
crystal
outline
ball, okay, so
that.
probably not.
Tonight, as of tonight, no.
Good,
If something
okay.
comes up,
So next thing is the fund balance transfers. I notice on the yes/no questions that there seems to be more, are there fund balance transfers of more than 5%? I'm wondering if that wasn't the correction work that was done to move money around to become compliant with a couple of issues they had.
Yes.
Good. Now I'm just gonna summarize this for people who weren't at the last meeting. The budget study. Staff has done really well in increasing and maximizing the funding that we get of things that we can control. Free and reduced lunch, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, recovery from SPED services and those kinds of things. It used to really bother me that someone would be up here saying, well, we're not, the state is doing this and that, but we weren't maximizing those things. And the good news about what's been done there is we've protected the integrity of the students and their dignity in that process. So thank you for at least getting the money that you know you can get. I think we can all assume that at least 20% of our current budget capacity is dependent on charter revenue, at least.
It's 30%, Ken.
Just go with 20 and it's more palatable that way. And that the 1% oversight fee is not a moneymaker. That would be saying like we could take 1% of our budget and staff the district office. So we're highly dependent on those charters to run themselves at that level, at least the upper administrative level. And the idea is the oversight that our staff gives, it kind of becomes automated, cursory, and highly dependent on audits. We understand that the fund balance for the bond is gone, except for 12 cents. Okay, so there is no more money in the high school bond to do these projects. And so with the charter dependency we have, the money to finish these projects is coming from charter income. Everybody got that. And the volatility, I asked about volatility in the budget study, and you heard tonight that the level of enrollment in the charter system is going up. So the amount of money coming back is also going up. So if you're funding your projects completely out of charter money, that's a good indicator if there's no volatility there. I don't like having charters brought to me up here to make a decision where it's, you know what, if I don't approve that charter, this fence doesn't get, I do not like being put out in that position. Anytime I feel I'm being put in that position, and it's not really about the validity of the charter and its ability to serve students that it's supposed to serve, you're gonna hear me ring out. I've always asked that staff continue the process of having legal look at it and make sure that we're relatively sure that there's not gonna be a challenge against it later. So I'm gonna expect to make a choice about the validity of the educational program and not a need to have the money to finish the project. My understanding is that right now, we've got more than $4 million worth of projects on the table. We're short of having the money to do those. But I want to reaffirm everyone, when you're in a governmental agency and someone says, what would you like to do? You don't put the minimum down. You say, I'd like to do this and this and this. And then when you put the bid projects out, or bid the projects, there's a certain amount of, here's an ad alternate. If the bids come in low enough, we could do that. But I do want to point out that right now is not a time, if we were to go into a joint use agreement and someone said to come in, your cost share of this is 15% of the project, we are a tad short, at least right now, of finishing the projects that we have on the table for our 5-year plan. So there's not a lot there. ADA is flat. We can't control where kids go, but the focus that staff is giving, and when we focus our resources on supporting staff and have a fine reputation, our hedge against being dependent on sources like charter schools to be valid. Every kid that comes in here is 28 kids out there we don't have to sponsor at 3%. So I so much appreciate staff's effort to capture the funding that we have coming. I appreciate Mr. King's realignments at the top end of the district office staff to reduce costs there, because we're asking him not only to be budget or cost neutral, but less than cost neutral. So when you make changes, come back with some savings that throw on the table. So you've done that already. And finally, Ms. David, again, I'm still learning how to count to 10, and you've made this really easy for me, so thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I do. Thank you, Ken. Ms. David, thank you very much for this report. The last 2 reports that I've had from you have been very impressive, and I'm just very grateful to have you here and for you rising up to the occasion in the absence of Dr. Distaso. Thank you so much. Okay, 12.4, the first interim financial report. We're now approving this. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, aye. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.
On future agenda items, 14.0, we have a special board meeting on January 18th. We have method K through 8, 9 through 12 charter school material revision hearing, which we received tonight. We have the actual hearing. And January 25th, and then we also have single school site plans, so from each school. 15.0, we have calendar.
Can I add,
Yes, Mr.
can we add, can we formally add safe routes to school?
Safe routes to school has been completely, we had a consensus on that. We are adding safe routes to school, Mr. Pfalzgraf, to, it's even better than what you're asking. We're adding it to, right after, to 10.4, after superintendent, before new construction.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we're actually done that. We're going to, until this safe routes to school is done, Jackie, every board meeting, we're going to hear about it. So just like we have new construction for our phase 3, every board meeting, just like we have board member comments, it's gonna be a part of correspondence, proposals, and reports, okay?
I already knew that, but thanks. Next, joint use agreement.
Okay, joint use agreement,
We have a county rep come in and explain the program.
we have agendized that for the next board meeting on the 11th.
Perfect, thank you.
You're very welcome. Yolanda, thank you very much. So the joint use has been agendized for our very next meeting, and as I said, I plan on supporting that. We're moving on to calendar, January 11th. We have a board meeting, regular time, just like today, starting at 6:30 for closed session, and 7:30 we have our public meeting. January 18th, we have a special board meeting, and that's going to be at this district office, starting at 7:30, no closed session.
Correct.
And the January 25th meeting has been canceled. 16.0, closed session. In order to make a report of what happened in closed session, I need a move.
I'll move.
You know what, Mr. President, can I go back to one thing?
Go ahead, please.
Would the board prefer, I'm flexible either way, but I'm just wondering if the board would prefer, and just for time purposes, to move January 18th to the regular 6:30
I'm
time.
very happy with that.
Okay.
Yeah, because we
As
got,
long as it's not earlier than 6:30.
No, we
No.
will not do that.
okay, so we have no closed session, and at our special meeting will start at 7:30. Please make sure, 6:30, I'm sorry, instead of 7:30, and please make sure that's posted as such,
You got it.
as we call it. And I will second Ken's motion for 16.1. The report for today's closed session is that the board unanimously agreed to a final settlement agreement with a former employee. We're moving on to 17.0, adjournment. Do I have a move? Move.
I'll
Thank you.
second it.
Thank you,
I'll
Mr.
second
Fox.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. And at 10:44 p.m., we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you very much, guys. All in
We have
favor?